Now let's see when it comes to solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. This is the quadratic formula. So if the quadratic equation is in standard form, the coefficient of the quadratic term is A, coefficient of the linear term is B, and C is the constant. Now, the quadratic formula is negative B, B being the coefficient of the linear term, plus or minus the square root of the B squared minus 4AC over 2A. Now that we have the formula, all we need to do when we have an example is to identify first is to put the equation in standard form, identify A, B, C, plug them in the equation, the formula, and simplify. So let's go ahead and practice with these examples. So first, this equation 2x squared equals x minus 3 needs to be in standard form before we can use the quadratic formula. So we would subtract x on both sides and add 3 on both sides. Subtract x and add 3 on both sides of the equal sign. So that gives me the standard form equation 2x squared minus x plus 3 equals 0, because when you combine this, it will be 0. Then we have A, coefficient of the quadratic term is 2. B, coefficient of the linear term is negative 1. And C, constant is 3. The formula says that in this equation, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a times c over 2 times a. Now let's substitute a, b, c in this equation, in this formula. B is negative 1, so negative b will be negative 1 plus minus the square root of b squared negative 1 squared minus 4, a is 2 and c is 3 over 2 times the value of a, that is 2. Simplify inside of the radical first. Well, we can simplify this. Negative 1 is plus 1 plus minus square root. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. Negative 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. So that's negative 24 plus 1, negative 23 over 4. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2, 8. 8 times 3, 24 in the minus sign. So that's negative 23. So then we have the fact that this is a negative number inside of the radical that takes you to a complex number, I outside. So that is x equals 1 plus I square root of 23. 23. Remember, 23, we won't be able to simplify this radical. That's why I keep 23, because 23 is a prime number. You can't even factor it further than 23 times 1 over 4. In another solution, remember plus minus, I use the plus here. Let me use the minus. That equals 1 minus I square root of 23 over 4. And I can write my solution set as the first solution, 1 plus I square root of 23, comma, 1 minus square root of 23, 1 minus square root of 23. That's the solution set. Next example. Same thing. We're going to want to make sure that the equation is in standard form. Let me move all the terms here to the other side by subtracting or adding, depends on the sign. I get 6x squared minus 2x, and then minus 1 equals 0. We would have a coefficient of the quadratic term is 6. B coefficient of the linear term is -2. And C coefficient constant is -1. I'm just going to replace in the quadratic formula. X is negative b with b equals -2. Negative of a negative number is a positive number, so that's +2. Plus minus the square root of b squared, that's -2 squared minus 4 times a, that is 6, c, that is -1, over 2 times a is 6. Let's simplify. X equals 2 plus minus square root of 4 plus, because we have -4 times 6, that's -24, and -24 times -1 is +24 over 12. 2 times 6 is 12. Now, x equals 2 plus minus 24 plus 4 is 28. That is square root of 28 over 12. Now we can simplify square root of 28 as square root of 4 times square root of 7. Square root of 7 is not it is not an integer, so I'm gonna keep it square root of 7, but square root of 2 is an integer that is 2. Square root of 4 is an integer that is 2. So square root of 28 is 2, which is square root of 4, square root of 7. Now, instead, we simplify the square root of 28 as 2 square root of 7. Instead of square root of 28, we're going to have x equals 2 plus minus 2 square root of 7 over 12. We can simplify all the terms. This one divide by 2, this one divide by 2, and this one divide by 2 to get x equals 1 plus minus square root of 7 over 6. So we have two solutions. One is 1 plus square root of 7 over 6, comma, 1 minus square root of 7 over 6. Let's move on to the next example. The next example is more complicated because remember we covered rational equations. So since we are now getting more comfortable with the concepts, I'm giving you an equation where the equation is first a quadratic. When you manipulate your equation, you would get a quadratic equation, but it starts, the problem is more combined, more complex, where you have a rational equation. So you can go back and remember the properties or the steps when solving a rational equation. Now, first, since it's a rational equation, we're going to want to make sure we factor the expression as linear term. This is already linear. This is linear, but this one is not. We're going to see if we can factor x, all the denominators. So first one is good. So 5x over x minus 2 plus 6 over. Now let's factor x squared plus x minus 6, thinking about two factors, right? Two factors that when you multiply, you get -6, and when you add them, you get +1. -6, let me factor it as 1, -6. Well, we want -1 plus 6 because since the coefficient of b is plus, so the smaller number will be negative. This would not work because the sum is 5. We want +1, so not work. You can continue to search. The two factors are continue to search by -2 and 3. So let's do this because I think the next -2 and 3, when you add, it's +1. So that's gonna be x minus 2, x plus 3. X minus 2, x plus 3 equals x minus 1 over x plus 3. Now, x minus 2, x minus 2, x plus 3, x plus 3. So the only factors we have in denominator is x minus 2 and x plus 3. So the least common multiple for the denominator, the least common denominator is x minus 2 times x plus 3. So the excluded values are going to be the values that make LCD equal 0. All right, x equals +2 for this one, and x equals -3 for this one. Now, we're going to make sure that the denominators for all the fractions is x minus 2 times x minus x plus 3. So this one is x plus x minus 2. We need to multiply top and bottom by x plus 3 to complete the common denominator. So that's 5x times x plus 3 over x minus 2 times x plus 3. So we changed the look of the expression. We didn't change the expression because if we simplify it by x plus 3, we still have the same expression that we had prior to multiply top and bottom by it. But the good thing about it is that we get a common denominator, the denominator that will be common for all of them, where we could simplify, eliminate the denominator and solve only the numerators. Now let's go to the next fraction. What do we need? I'm looking at this, I see that all the denominator is already the LCD, so we don't have to change anything. So it's just going to be plus 6 over plus 6 over x plus x minus 2 times x plus 3. And then finally, we have x plus 3 here. We need x minus 2 to complete the LCD. So that's going to be x minus 1 times x plus over x plus 3 times x minus 2. So we get the common denominator. Also for this other fraction, now we got what we want, and we can go ahead and omit the denominator and solve only with the numerators. So the equation becomes 5. We distribute this over while we are dropping the denominator. So that's 5x squared plus 15x plus 6 equals x minus 1. We're going to write this equation in standard form. That's 5x squared plus, we're going to subtract x on both sides. That's plus 14x. And then we're going to add 1 on both sides. So that is plus 7 equals 0. Now we have a quadratic equation in standard form, but coefficient of the quadratic term is not 1, and it's not the common factor. We're going to multiply 5 and 7. 5 and 7, that is 35. Now we're going to try to see if we can find two factors of 35 that the sum is 14. It looks like we can't find any factors, so we're going to use the quadratic formula. I forgot that we were practicing using quadratic formula, so it's obvious that we might be in a we may have been in a situation where the equation cannot be solved by factoring, which is fine. Now, since we were practicing and we know quadratic formula, so let's identify A equals 5, B equals 14, and C equals 7, right? So x equals b squared, so that's 14 squared, negative b plus minus the square root of b squared, that's 14 squared, minus 4, a is 5, c is 7, over 2 times the value of a, 5. X equals negative 14 squared, 14 squared is 196. So that's plus minus the square root of 196 minus 4, negative 4. 4 times 5 is 20 times 7, that is 140 over 10. 2 times 5 is 10. Now x equals negative 14 plus minus the square root of, that's 140, of 196 minus 140. 196 196 minus 140. So that is 56 over 10. We get x equals. Now let's see if we can simplify 196. 196 can be written as 4 times 14. I mean, sorry, not 196. 56 can be written as 56 can be written as 4 times 14. Let's see again. No. So that's 56 divided by 4, that is 14. So that's negative 14 plus minus square root of 4 times 14 over 10. Then x equals negative 14. Square root of 4 is 2 plus minus 2 square root of 14 over 10. Simplify everything by 2. So x equals negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7. 2 square root of 14, you're not dividing the 14 by 2 because it's inside of a radical. You're only dividing the 2 by 2, that is just plus minus square root of 14 over 10 divided by 2, that's 5. Your solution set is negative 7 plus square root of 14 over 5, or negative 7 minus square root of 14 over 5. Next and final example in using the quadratic formula is the equation 2x squared plus 3 equals negative 5x. Standard form is when you subtract 5x on both sides. So the equation in standard form is 2x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0. Obviously, you probably would have been able to solve it by factoring, because I see if you multiply 2 and 3, that would be 6, and then maybe not. Never mind. But oh yeah, negative 2 times negative 3 would have been negative 5. But they said by using the quadratic formula, so you need to follow the exact direction given in the problem so you can earn full credit. So you cannot use by factoring in this case, because the indication said that you should use the quadratic formula. Now, using the quadratic formula means that I'm going to identify A, B, and C. A, B, and C. So A equals 2, B equals negative 5, and C equals 3. That said, I'm going to go with the equation, the quadratic formula. It's negative b. Since b is negative 5, so negative b would be positive 5 plus minus the square root of b squared. So negative 5 squared minus 4. A is 2 and c is 3 over 2 times A equals 2. Let's simplify this. X equals 5 plus minus square root of, I need one number inside of the radical. So that is 25 minus 24. So that is 1/4. And then move on to next step, which is since you know square root of 1 is 1, it's going to be x equals 5 plus minus 1/4. The two solutions are x equals 5 plus 1/4 or x equals 5 minus 1/4. So x equals 6/4 or x equals 4/4. X is simplified by 2, 3/2, or x equals 1. And your solution set, 3/2, 1 is your solution set.